1918, in the trenches of World War I. The Great War brought us into modern warfare, introducing the new horrors of battle. This war brought havoc and destruction across the globe. Additionally, the fatalities brought this war up to the 5th deadliest war of all time. However, it wasn't the deadliest thing in the year 1918. That was the Spanish flu.
In this demonstration, each minifigure will equal about 5 million people. By the end of World War I, an estimated 15 to 22 million soldiers and civilians were killed by human warfare. The Spanish flu, in contrast, claimed the lives of around 50 to 100 million people. This makes it the second of the deadliest diseases in history. At least 50 million people dead. How did so many die? This is how miscommunication shaped the Spanish flu of 1918.
The neglect of communication allowed the Spanish flu to spread so easily, causing millions of people to die. It educated the world on the virus, and, as it learned, slowly but surely, how to communicate to stop the virus. Today, we'll look at the background of the Spanish flu and how it affected its origination. We'll also see how communication played a crucial role in stopping the spread and creating the vaccine. Finally, I'll tell you how we can learn from this epidemic in the modern context.
Let's take a look at some of the medical advancements before the Spanish flu of 1918. In 1590, the microscope was invented, which played a huge part in medical advancement. Microscopes will not advance again until 1931, with Maxenel's electron microscope. In 1879, the first vaccine was created. It was used to treat cholera. In 1890, Emil von Behring discovers antitoxins, and he uses them to develop tetanus and diphtheria vaccines. Few medical advancements are seen here, as well as not many vaccines either. The world is not prepared for the Spanish flu. Now for the global context in World War I. In April of 1917, the United States joins World War I after a long period of neutrality. 3 million total people are added to the military, causing unemployment to decline from 8% to 1.5%. Except for Britain and Italy, European countries suffered greatly during the war. In Austria, for example, most pigs were slaughtered, so at the war's end there was no meat. When they entered the war, the US created a draft. However, the public response wasn't great. To combat that response, the Espionage Act of 1917 and the Sedition Act of 1918 were created to outlaw any anti-war sentiment. This includes anything that might degrade the U.S.'s position in the war, including reports of the Spanish flu, strengthening the lack of communication. Especially in the European countries, food rights rose and the moral economy fell. Wartime social movements took different forms, incorporating varying levels of violence and targeting either state institutions or shop owners. Well, where did the Spanish flu start exactly? Well, it's hard to say for sure. Our first suspect is Fort Riley, Kansas, where 500 soldiers were diagnosed with flu-like symptoms on March 4th, 1918. These 500 soldiers were later shipped out to Europe. Our second suspect is the Shaanxi province, China, where as early as 1917, people were diagnosed with, again, flu-like symptoms. Our final suspect is the disease-ridden trenches of World War I. These trenches, already known for their death and decay. Out of all of these suspects, one thing is for sure. The Spanish flu didn't start in Spain. How do we know this? World War I was a war that was heavily dependent on manpower. The more men you had, the stronger you looked. If you had a national pandemic going around, then your manpower would not look so strong. This led many nations to never report their cases, thus strengthening the lack of communication. Spain, who was neutral in the war, reported their cases. Even Alfonso XIII ended up contracting the virus, who eventually survived. This led to the miscommunication that it was the Spanish flu. As the world became more familiar with the Spanish flu, miscommunication spread. Here, a man claims that prohibition caused the Spanish flu. A dairy ad says that Spanish flu is a bacteria, and by drinking their milk, you can be cured of the Spanish flu. A US official says that you can't catch the real flu twice. Today we know that the Spanish flu can mutate into different forms, and people still catch the flu today. As the Spanish flu spread across the globe, it depended on each leader's response to stop the spread. Each leader's response to the public. The orange area marks when each city started their lockdown. Philadelphia and New Orleans started their lockdowns later than they should have, and so they experienced much death. Indianapolis and Minneapolis started their lockdowns relatively earlier, and so they experienced less death.
Does all of this sound familiar? 100 years later, history has repeated itself. Some cities did not begin lockdown at a soon enough time, and those cities had to pay the price.
So when was the vaccine actually created? For over 10 years, the Spanish flu was thought to be a bacteria. Jonas Salk and Thomas Francis debunked this theory in the 1930s, and they finally created a vaccine in 1938. These vaccines, however, did not reach the American public until 1942. If better communication was practiced, these unnecessary delays could have been avoided.
So, what can we learn from the Spanish flu? Well, vaccines are one of the most prominent forms of this. The pandemic crucially strengthened the global importance of the vaccine. The world still struggles to accept them as a form of medicine, but they are well integrated into the medical system, and they are being used to solve the modern coronavirus. Face masks, social distancing, and good hygiene can all be traced back to the 1918 virus as a way to slow down the spread. The Spanish flu and other viruses like it influenced the creations of many medical organizations, including the CDC.
Did we learn our lesson? For the most part, it would seem so. However, many mistakes were made in initiating the lockdown and controlling the coronavirus. Many say it will never be the same as it was in 2019. But we recovered from the Spanish flu, just as we will recover from the coronavirus. History is important to our present. Only by looking through the lenses of the past can we see our future. Miscommunication blurs the origination of the Spanish flu. It also greatly contributed to its name. Lack of communication allowed the Spanish flu to spread so easily. Hindered lockdowns increased the death toll. Finally, miscommunication delayed a vaccine until nearly 20 years after the outbreak.
In conclusion, the several forms of miscommunication and non-communication allowed the Spanish flu to spread so easily, causing millions of people to die. It educated the world on the virus, and as it learned, slowly but surely, how to communicate to stop the virus. Today, we are still learning. I hope that in this video that you learned something.